The Vanderbilt Commodores talent is at an all-time high entering 2025 with Clark Lee. Let's get it.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's good? Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen. On today's episode, we discuss the impact of the trio of Dores that will make the upcoming season. All right, we'll discuss the impact that those guys are going to have on the team. Jordan White, Diego Pavia, and Eli Stowers are all listed in the top 3 returning players in college football by the College Sports Network. So the talent is at an all-time high under Clark Lee right now. Let's take advantage. After that, we're going to try to answer the question, can Mark Byington and Vandy get that signature road win? They'll have a chance to do so at Texas A&M. Then we wrap up the show by breaking down baseball's 7-inning rout of Texas Tech. The run rule was actually in effect. So, like I said, thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, yes, I said it in the cold open. This team, for the first time in a long time, is loaded. Okay. And it's got some star power now. And that's something that even last year, like you had Diego Pavia, but you weren't real sure what he was going to have. You didn't really have a whole lot of star power outside of that. Now you've got 3 guys. You've got a legitimate NFL offensive lineman. He's probably the highest rated. He is the highest rated of those 3, Diego Pavia, Eli Stowers, and himself, Jordan White. He's number 48 in this list. So you get an NFL caliber offensive lineman. Now you've got an NFL caliber tight end that probably could have gotten drafted had he come out in this year's draft, but he decided to come back to try to improve his draft stock, and I think he absolutely can. So, these guys are going to make a massive impact. I think this is going to be an exciting season for Vanderbilt football because when you look at what these 3 guys can do for this offense, I think the sky's the limit here because you finally get that piece in the offensive line. Like you had a solid group last year, but it didn't have the star power obviously across the line. Stephen Hubbard is probably going to get drafted. He's probably your NFL guy, but he played at one of the guard positions. But you have a guy that's going to lead this offensive line, Jordan White, as the center. And he's the guy that's going to be kind of making sure everything gets called right. The protections are in the right place. He's going to get this offensive line, and he's going to be the leader of the communication. And so when you talk about offensive line play, and I talked about this, we talked about offensive line play on the squad show before. I've talked about it in everything that I've done, how important it is for offensive lines to have trust, rapport, chemistry, communication. All of that is important for these offensive linemen to be able to do, because without that, you can't really function as a unit, and you can't really have much of a run game. You can't really be effective in pass protection if you can't communicate. And that's not communicating just on Saturdays, just during that game. It's communicating every other day, every other time you're together. It's communicating in the film room. It's communicating in walkthroughs, practice settings, individual periods, team periods, inside periods, any sort of drill work you're doing, you've got to be able to have that communication, even if verbal and nonverbal. You've got to be able to, your teammates cross the line, regardless of who you are. Jordan White, it could be whoever's starting at the guards, whoever's starting at the tackles. They have to have that communication. That's going to be the group that's going to be most successful. So he brings that to the table, his veteran leadership. He wasn't on this team last year, but he's one of those guys that can step right in and just kind of bring his leadership on board. And you're starting to kind of see that. This group is starting to come together a little bit. You're seeing the chemistry because of the pictures I saw on social media where those guys are out there in the snow driving the sled. I I mean, I don't know how many other offensive lines were doing that around the country. It could have been all for show. It doesn't matter. It's camaraderie at the basic level. I don't care if they were doing it for show. I don't care if they were actually getting actual work in. You push that sled around, that's actual work. I mean, even if you pushed around for 15 minutes for a photo op and went inside, that's a team bonding, chemistry, and a little bit of work, like a little bit of work that you wouldn't have normally gotten on a day like that. So, all of that's beneficial regardless of what their intentions are, because I could see it now. I say, oh, this is great. They're out there in the snow, and people are like, that's for show, right? And they weren't being serious. Well, in all honesty, you're still getting the work. You're still getting the bonding. You're still getting the chemistry. So it is effective. No matter how you spin it, it's effective. And it's a great thing. They were all out there, and I'm sure they were all busting each other's chops and all that good stuff. So Jordan White's going to be a massive piece, figuratively and literally, in this offensive line. And, of course, Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers. I can't say this enough. They're going to be the top quarterback tight end duo. And Eli Stowers is going to be a fixture in this passing game. He's going to kind of be the key that makes it all go. He's going to be the X factor. He's going to be the guy that's going to be involved in, he can attack you vertically as he did in the bowl game. He can attack you he can attack you in crossing routes, screen game. He can be the pitch guy in the option run game. He can be the shovel guy in the shovel option game, or the power shovel option attack. Like, he can be different weapons for different situations, and he's versatile enough to do it. He can throw a touchdown pass, and he was in a gadget play, threw a touchdown pass this year. Probably had an opportunity for multiple when they ran that end around pass with Eli Stowers, because of course he was a former quarterback. So these guys are gonna these guys are gonna impact this offense a great deal, because Jordan White's going to get the offensive line going, and Pavia and Stowers are the playmakers that this group needs. Quarterback designed runs, option attacks, quick game, stretching the field vertically. Eli Stowers is going to be the main guy to do all of that. Everything else is going to work off of that. You're going to have other guys pitch in. Obviously, I think you're going to have better quality receivers around that group. But it's going to come down to really Eli Stowers and Diego Pavia. Can they make it happen? And can Jordan White lead this offensive line from the center position to get everything going, not only in pass protection, but in the run game as well? Can they get this option attack going? Can they run downhill more effectively? Can there be a little bit of more motivation? And I think some of the changes that were made, bringing in Jordan White, bringing in a new offensive line coach to help Coach K, because I think Coach K is going to ride off into the sunset after this year. Just all those things I think are going to be beneficial. Now, also, this has other implications as well, because when you look at a list like that, and I don't care, you can say what you want to say about the list, the validity of the list, or where it's from, who published it, whatever. But you scroll social media and you see a top 100 returning players list, and you see some of the names that are on there, and then you scroll and see Jordan White, then you scroll one more page and you see Diego Pavia, and you scroll another page and you see Eli Stowers. You see that Vandy logo in the top 100 returning players 3 times. And like I said, this list could be completely just, you say whatever you want to about the list, but the optics of being on a list like this, regardless of the legitimacy of it, the optics of being on that list is great. Okay. And Vandy's at the stage where that's what they need right now. They need to show up on those lists, because that gives recruits, that gives transfer portal recruits, that gives anybody marketing Vandy to these recruits. It gives them a little bit more firepower. It gives them another tool in the toolbox to say, hey, again, we're on the rise. This is going to, this is the place where you need to be. We're going to invest in you in NIL. We're obviously investing in these guys, and this is the result. These guys weren't on these lists last year. They are now. And there's only and the only guy that could have possibly been on these lists is Diego Pavia last year. He's on there, plus his number 1 target now, plus his center. Like, you come play offensive line, you're going to, you have a chance to get on this list. Jordan White, right? So that's only going to create a snowball effect when they're recruiting. Like, they're in it for Trey Henderson, which he's a top edge guy. He's got Vandy in his top 10. I think he's going to official to Vandy. So that's going to be, the implications of starting to get guys on lists. Like, just that seems so minuscule, but it is unreal because you have guys on lists and people take you seriously. And then that starts to snowball. Then you start getting more guys on lists and you start getting more guys on different lists. And next thing you know, you're talking about, everybody's talking about Vandy being a factor because they have all this returning production coming back. Like, there's things that are slowly evolving in the world of preseason hype for Vandy. And once you kind of get on that, then you start to get the players that legitimately can help you back up that hype. And then you start to become a machine. That happened at Ole Miss. They got to, when Lane Kiffin took that job, they've always been a good program. Don't get me wrong. They had some down years before Kiffin got there. But they've always been a pretty solid program, but like never, I don't think anybody would ever thought they would be in this mix where they would be disappointed by almost making it to the college football playoff. Right. So that's kind of my example there. They built it. They used hype. They used that hype train. They used all of that, guys getting on lists and transfer portal guys coming in and investing in NIL and, all of that stuff. They invested in all of that. They took every bit of that and ran every article that an Ole Miss player was named in. They took it and ran with it. And that's what Vanderbilt needs to do. And that's what they are doing. And you see all these you see all the social media game is on point. And that's exactly what needs to happen. So this is great. 3 players on a top 100 list. That wouldn't have happened last year, right? That didn't happen last year. It's happening now. That gives you an indication that this thing's on the rise. So get excited about that. I think, the implications outside of just what we already know that these players are going to contribute is great enough. So keep that up. I think they need to build on that momentum. And I think they are in social media. So, and they are in recruiting as well. So it's going to be exciting. Now, speaking of exciting, Vandy basketball is ready, itching to get that signature road win. They have a chance to do so at Texas A&M. Can they pull it off? We'll see. But you're going to have to stick around to see why. All right, talking about FanDuel. Right? When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. So I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. So make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. If you need a second listen, check out Locked On SEC. It's the place for you. Chris Gordy does a great job of breaking down the SEC, which is the best conference in all the land. Also, Stephen Willis, if you need if you want to check out a more specific show that focuses on perspectives and commentary, just like this one does, Locked On Ole Miss is really a good place for you. Steve does a phenomenal job with his perspectives, and his commentary is second to none. Just ask the Ole Miss crowd; he's the most watched Ole Miss podcast in the Ole Miss podcast stratosphere. So take that for what it's worth, but it is true. It's a great listen. So. Can the Hoops team get a road win? That's their last hurdle. That's their last thing. Can they get that signature road win? I think they can. I think they can. because this is a situation to where I think some of the things they needed to heal with their second half problems, I think they went a long way into doing that against Ole Miss. A lot of the stuff that would happen to them in the second half, they were able to overcome some of that. It still happened, but they were able to overcome some of that. Now it's a 6 p.m. Central Standard Time tip at Reed Arena in College Station. Texas A&M is ranked 12th in the AP poll. There's all sorts of rankings, Ken Palm, Net, whatever. A&M's anywhere from 20 to 17. Bracket matrix, they're number 2. So all that good stuff. Texas A&M is a great team. They lean on you. They wear you down. They don't have a ton of holes. They don't have a ton of weaknesses. But Vandy is a team that's very tough, very, very scrappy, but also a team that in its team chemistry and their ability to adjust to adversity, they're still very raw. I don't want to say they're bad because I don't think they're bad. They're just there's some situations they get into. Sometimes they can't stop the unraveling, and they hadn't been able to until the Ole Miss game, being able to stop the second half unraveling. They can jump out on you, but then you have a string of things that go wrong. They have a hard time essentially stopping that unraveling. So, but they did just that against Ole Miss, so they figured at least that part of it out. But they need to continue that on the road. Okay, so it's a must win, and all that good stuff. And they were in a must win situation against Ole Miss. They're kind of in. They're not totally in must win territory, but I think if they're at least going to lose, if they're going to lose this game, it needs to be competitive. A road win against A&M, which would be it'd be a quad 1 road win, I think would get them in. I think they would be a lock at that point. I think nothing else would matter after this Texas A&M win if they were to get this win, because it's a top 12 team, and it would be an impressive win. If they could overcome it, it would be absolutely impressive. So here's what to expect, though. It's going to be a tough road, but if they get this win, I think, barring a massive collapse or barring seismic shift, as I'm recording this, Georgia just knocked off Florida. So that's pretty cool, actually. So defense is going to take center stage for this one. I think this is going to be a very defensive slugfest. I'm talking A&M Vandy, not Georgia, Florida. But, the Aggies are only allowing 66 points per game. So they're, like they say, they're clamps, right? Their defense, Vandy's defense is pretty daggum good too. So this is going to be kind of a slugfest, actually. Kind of like your in football terms, kind of like your 10-7 defensive slugfest, where it's just good football, but it's just defensive oriented. So there's not a whole lot of points, but there's hitting, there's good play, there's good play on defense. It's going to be kind of the basketball version of that, I can see. All right. The Aggies are ranked first in the country in blocks per game, which is going to make Vandy's ability to get to the rim kind of difficult. Vandy is 272nd in the country in blocks allowed. I don't think that's good. I'm not real sure. I don't feel like that's good. I feel like that means they're getting a lot of their shots blocked, right? I think that stat is meant to say, hey, if you don't allow a whole lot of shots to get blocked, then you're higher ranked. So don't think that's going to be a good stat to roll into A&M with, because A&M's number 1 in blocks. Texas A&M likes to play in the paint, and they're very patient too. Like against and there's a lot of their games, if you watch, they get down early, but they don't panic. They play their game. They get the ball down in the paint and they go, right. And and on the defensive side of the ball, they try to allow you to come into the paint and try their big guys. So they've got a very detailed oriented plan. Buzz Williams is a phenomenal coach. He did so at Virginia Tech. Then he came to A&M. He's been really good for them. And this team is kind of one of those teams that I'll admit, my ear is probably not as open to college basketball talk as most, but I don't feel like A&M's getting talked about a whole lot. They're kind of like the elite sleeper team, right? Sleeper in the fact that not a lot of people are just talking about them on a consistent basis, but they're going to be one of those teams where when they get into the dance, they're going to be tough to contend with. So, but they had the best offensive rebounding percentage. They're really good on the boards. Anything in the paint, anything scoring around the rim or defending the rim, they're good at, right? So Vanderbilt's going to have to contend with that. If Vanderbilt's going to win, I think a good strategy, which is not a really effective for Vanderbilt, is they're going to have to figure out a way to shoot the three. They can shoot the three, they might have a chance. If they can have a really good shooting night, they'll have a chance. But other than that, I think it's going to be a tough go. They're going to have to move the ball around. I think they're going to have to try to get A&M in transition and running. If they can get A&M on the run, they have a good chance. If they can try to get those big guys to kind of move and create just a little sliver of space, Jason Edwards is good at getting to the rim and scoring. Chris Magnon, Tyler Tanner, AJ Hogarth, those guys are good at getting to the rim. It's just a matter of trying to get those big bodies off their spot so that they can actually create enough space for themselves to be able to get some buckets. So they're going to have to get off to a fast start. They're going to have to figure out a way to hit mid-range shots, 3-point shots, and they're going to have to figure out a way to score and just really kind of play well outside the paint, because A&M's good at sending the ball the other way, just like Kentucky was, just like who's the game they played at home before Ole Miss? Whatever, I can't remember. Whatever that team was, they were swatting a lot of shots too. So, this is going to be an interesting game. This is going to be a game where you look at it, you come out of it, and you go, "Whew, that was physical." That was, this is going to be. I have a feeling. My feeling is this game is going to be an old school basketball game, like an old school, Knicks Pacers slugfest, where not a lot of scoring, bodies flying around, shots getting blocked, pockets getting picked, all that good stuff. Like, I think it's going to be one of those type games. And I say that, and it's probably going to be, 103 to 101. That's just kind of how my luck goes sometimes. So maybe I'll bet the under, and then this game will turn into an offensive explosion where it's just up and down the floor. So anyway, but signature road win. They have a good chance, but they're going to have to do some work. It's going to take some work, but they can get it. So the Vandy boys, they're rolling, dude. And I know it's against Texas Tech. Not even Texas Tech, Tennessee Tech. Excuse me. I know it's against Tennessee Tech. But a midweek blowout when the focus, I think everyone understands the focus is gone. Midweek blowout. Is this team actually for real? I keep asking that question, but with the way the Vandy boys were last year, you still kind of have to ask that question at this point. We'll talk about it next. All right, thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen. We are wrapping up the show here, talking a little Vandy boys baseball. It's baseball season too, and I've heard Vandy baseball is a pretty popular thing. So, but they dominate Tennessee Tech in a 16-3 rout. They run ruled them. That game only lasted 7 innings, which is kind of a shame because you could have gotten some freshmen some innings, or an at bat or two. But nonetheless, they scored 14 unanswered in a 16-3 7-inning rout of Tennessee Tech. Tennessee Tech is 6-3 on the season, so they're not a bad team, which is kind of impressive, really. The Commodores had one of the main stats that stood out to me in this game is the Commodores had 25 base runners. So every player in the starting lineup reached base at least once. RJ Austin continues to ball out. Jacob Humphrey continues to ball out. Riley Nelson, Colin Barzy. I mean, they all had great nights. Starter Austin Nye, the science guy, he gave up 2 runs in the first inning, but he settled in to get through 2 1/3 without allowing any more runs. This was one of those games where luckily it was a rout and they were able to get some guys relief. Brendan Cyber came in. He threw 1 2/3 scoreless. He gets the win, actually. He gets credit for the win. Austin Nye had a little bit of growing pains here against, in the first inning. But again, it's one of those things, freshman pitcher starting midweek. Great game to cut his teeth on at home. But it's the Commodores' 4th straight game to score double-figure runs and their 7th straight win. So they're on a roll. I couldn't say the same thing about last year's group. So here's the thing with this team to know looking forward. I think early in the season, one of the concerns that I've seen is that this and it would be a concern that I had if I didn't really know how baseball works, but the different lineups and the constant changing of the lineups. I know that's kind of a topic. I've seen it. I've thought about it myself as well. This early in the season, I don't think it's a big deal. I think the guys that you need to get consistent work are getting consistent work. It's trying to find the right mix of guys. It's trying to find who can do what, where, who you can count on day in and day out, who can come in. Because in college baseball, it's going to be about, they're trying to find guys that can come in and pinch hitting situations. So they're trying to get guys used to not having those consistent at bats. Because those situations are going to come up, right? You're gonna have a guy get banged up on Friday, and you're gonna have to replace him in a lineup with a guy that hasn't been, contributing. But if you can train these guys early to be used to having that mindset, I think last year some guys got comfortable, and some other guys, I don't want to say comfortable is not the right word if you're riding the bench, but they got in a place to where their focus wasn't quite there because they weren't playing, and they knew they weren't playing. And being a human being, they're probably not preparing as hard as they would if they were playing. And I know it's easy to say, well, he should be acting like he could be the starter in any given moment, but that's just not human nature. Humans, they do that kind of thing. They kind of back off the gas pedal, and when they know they're not being used. Now it's I could go in and they could legitimately say they can go in at any moment. I think Tim Corbin, that's another, approach change. He needs to get these guys used to being able to flip their mindset to be able to be productive on short notice. I think that's one of those underlying effects of why he's doing this lineup thing. And there's also some questions he needs to be answered as well, as far as who's going to start where. Does Barzy hit better in the 6 hole versus the 2 hole? Does Vastine, is he good at the 9 spot, or does he need to lead off, or, just things like that. Also lineup questions, specific things. He's trying to figure some things out. And with 2 national championships, I'm not going to question what he's doing, but I can certainly kind of help explain just a little bit more in depth with that. But that's going to be, it's going to be fun for this baseball team. I think this group is really good. I think Tim Corbin, making all the changes that he made, it's going to be a really, really good thing for this baseball program. And they're showing that they can handle it. They're showing that they can be focused enough to, they give up 2 runs in the first inning. Last year's Vandy group would have probably won that game 4-2 or 5-3 or something like that, with a 7th inning rally to get them, to get them over the threshold. They would have won that game like that. This year's team, 16-3, they're dominating a little bit. Now I'm curious to know, this is a loaded conference, so when you get to conference play, it's going to be a little trickier. But that's what he's kind of getting them prepared for. All the ebbs and flows of the college baseball season. I think he learned the hard way that you kind of have to be ready for those things. And there's only one way to be ready for those things. And those the unpredictable nature of injuries and having to insert guys in the lineup in a short notice is to insert guys in the lineup in short notice, regardless of injury situation. It's just, hey, we need to change it up. We need to shuffle it around. You go in, you go in, you go in. And then going back to the other guys. So that creates a sense of urgency, I think. And so that's kind of a good thing. But anyway, well, that's all I got. That's all we got here. We're going to wrap up this thing. Locked On Vandy, thanks for making us your first listen. At Locked On Vandy on all social media platforms. Follow it. Got a really big interview coming up. I'm going to be on the beat. I'm going to be in the beach. So we've got some really good stuff lined up for that week. And you're going to be really, really excited about the first thing that's coming up that week. I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to wait with anticipation, but it's going to be really fun. It's going to be really good. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. Got a chance to catch up with somebody that I really admired, in my coaching profession. And it's not Kurt Page, but somebody that, I had a really good connection with, and it's relevant. So you'll know. But anyway, anchor down. Peace out. Have a good one.